All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon. My name is Kelly Horton. I'm on the marketing team here, and I want to just touch on a few housekeeping items before we get started and bring in our presenter for today. So I want to just go over a few housekeeping items. If we can pull up the next slide. Perfect. So just to let everyone know, we will send an email out with a recording to the webinar for today. It usually takes about 24 hours. You'll see that show up in your inbox. We do want to keep this interactive, so use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to chat with us, submit any questions. We do have some backup from our product team on board today to help answer any questions. So we'll try to get to everything that you all submit. And lastly, tell us what you think. We want to know, what your thoughts are on the webinar. When we wrap up today, there'll be a short survey that pops up on your screen. So please just take a few seconds to fill that out for us and share your feedback. And then I want to do a quick call out on a contest that we're running right now. We're giving away a free trip to SuiteWorld this fall. So if you are currently using NetSuite or looking at implementing NetSuite or looking to attend their big conference this year, just scan this QR code and you'll get a registration form that you can fill out and schedule a meeting with us before August 6th. We'll announce the winner at a webinar on August 7th. So we'll make sure to send out more details for that. But yeah, just feel free to scan the QR code and that'll get you ready to go. So before we get started, I do want to set the stage a little just for our life cycle of an order webinar series, because this is a new event that we're kicking off. And so just to kind of let you know what to expect throughout the series of webinars, we plan to show you how ShipHawk offers a truly end-to-end fulfillment management solution. It doesn't just automate your operation, because there are plenty of solutions that can help you do that, but how these solutions were developed to fit your unique business needs and help your company scale. So you can see here in this graphic and throughout the series, we'll show you how there are actually two life cycles happening at the same time that we'll cover. One is the actual fulfillment operation in this outer ring here, and two is the end customer experience. So you can see the fulfillment operation starts with receiving items into the warehouse, putting them away, capturing weights and dimensions. We'll move on to cover cycle counting inventory as it's sitting in the warehouse. And when it comes to go pick those items, making sure you're doing that in an efficient manner. And then it comes back to packing and verifying what you actually picked and shipping. So we'll have webinars so you can see exactly how all of this functionality works and break it down in kind of these different stages. And then a little later on in the series, we'll show you how the audit reconciliation functionality, as well as some analytics work to make sure you're continually working to make your distribution centers faster. So that's the fulfillment operation lifecycle. And we'll also show you how we support your customer experience, whether a customer is buying online through an e-commerce site, whether they're buying an EDI order, and you're shipping to a retailer. So all these different channels are supported in one end-to-end platform. So make sure you check out our upcoming topics. I'll have a slide for you at the end that shows the next few topics and the dates that those are happening. But you have to be set up for success for an order before an order is ever actually placed, right? And that's why the first step in this cycle and what we're going to demo for you today is our receiving, put away, and cross-docking functionality. So starting off effectively will drive all the downstream efficiencies, which is why the beginning stage is so important. If you're receiving thousands of items, but not automating it, you'll likely end up wasting a lot of time. And we have so many rules and custom logic that we can offer to help you with that. So I want to jump in here. We'll introduce Autumn. She is our solution consultant. She's going to be walking you through the different features today. And so first up, we're going to cover receiving. So Autumn, I'll hand it over to you, and maybe you can just start with what is unique about the way ShipHawk handles receiving compared to some of the other automation tools out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the best way to do that is just to show what receiving looks like in our system. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into that. So there's two aspects of receiving that I'm going to show today, and that's the operator side of receiving from a handheld device that you'll see on the right-hand side here with that emulator. And then the other aspect is kind of the more managerial viewing of the system to be able to see what's going on in the warehouse, which is generally viewed from a desktop. And you'll see that on the left-hand side of the screen here. So I'll be kind of playing through both of these while we're going through them. So let's start with the operator side, right? So they're going to come into the warehouse, and the first thing they want to do maybe is start receiving for the day. So they're going to go ahead and grab their handheld. They're going to log in, which I've already done here. They can log into the location they're working in and the role that they're working in for that day if they have multiple roles. And then they're going to go ahead and select receive. So I'm going to do that. And most likely, they're going to go ahead and scan a receiving document at this point. So that can be a purchase order, a transfer order, an inbound shipment, RAs, whatever that may be for you guys. And they're going to go ahead and scan that. And we'll talk about what happens if they don't have that document number ready or scannable. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let's start with kind of the most typical scenario where they have that in front of them. Once they scan it, they're going to go ahead and see the items remaining to be received on that purchase order in this case. And so they're going to scan the item that's in front of them that they want to receive. So we'll go ahead and scan an item here. And you'll see that I'll be copying and pasting, but as an operator, you'd be scanning this with your handheld. So I'll go ahead and do that and select continue. They're going to be prompted for how many they're going to receive right now. And you'll see we've got 4 remaining to receive. I can go ahead and receive all 4 of those, and by default, it's going to be in the good status. They can also receive on hold or damaged, and they can control that at this time. And they could also, receive 3 that are good, and 1 that's on hold or damaged if that's necessary for them. So I'll go and say continue here. And we see the suggested put away here. This is optional. Some people like to do receiving and put away as one step, which we can support. Other people like to split out those processes, and that's something we can do as well. So we're going to go through the version of those being split out. So we'll kind of ignore that here, and that can be removed from your system in that case. Next, you're going to see this container ID here. So that is asking for the license plate or the container ID. So some of you guys might be wondering, what is license plating? And so we'll talk about that briefly as well. So license plating is generally a pre-printed label that you're going to add to the thing that you're receiving to. That could be a pallet, that could be a cart, that could be a container. And this is not mandatory. This is up to you guys. If you don't want to use license plating, we can remove that as well. But it can be a really helpful way to track your items. So it's essentially real-time locations, right? You can think about it as the license plate on your car, where it's going to tell you about where things have been, the history of that license plate, what items are on it, and its movement. So a lot of it's about traceability. You can query the license plate number, and you're going to know a lot about it. It's not just useful in receiving, but it's also useful for moving and put away and all other operations in the warehouse. For example, we're going to talk about put away in a minute, and I could just put away discrete items and do those one at a time or one SKU at a time, but I could also put away an entire license plate or container and do multiple at once. So in short, it's used to manage inventory movements throughout its life cycle and can just be a really effective way of moving many items or SKUs at once. So if you're utilizing license plating, you would scan it at this time. And I'll go ahead and just put in a license plate here. And generally, your operator would also put that label on the thing they're receiving to. So from that pre-printed roll of labels. So I'm going to say continue. And then we'll see where we're receiving at, and we're going to default that for you, but they can also choose a different location or scan a different location if they need to. And you can also print unit labels or case labels at this time if you need them and apply those to the items, which can also automatically print based on your roles. So now I'm going to save my receipt here, and we're writing back to NetSuite in real time right now. So this is important. There's certain cases where we want immediate write back to NetSuite, and this is generally one of them. You can have that real-time write back turned off for receipts if you want to receive at the end of receiving the entire PO, which can also be helpful if you want a one-to-one receipt transaction per PO. So that's a configurable setting. But just to talk a little bit about real-time, you can see here the different transactions that we do in real time versus on a schedule. So item fulfillment's being shipped, that's a real-time transaction. We're going to write that back to NetSuite immediately. Receipts, if you have that functionality on, which again, you can turn that off if you want to have that one-to-one PO for versus receipt transaction, and inventory adjustments. So you'll see here, I have that real-time setting on. It's going to say that's been processed, and I'll press continue. It's going to bring me back to that PO and what else is left to be received. So what if you have serial numbers and lot IDs that you need to capture at this time? That is something we can do. So I'll go ahead and scan another item on this PO. And this one I know is serialized and lot tracked. So I'm going to say continue there. It's going to prompt me for the quantity. Let's go ahead and say all 4. And now it's going to prompt me for that lot number. So I can go ahead and define a new one at this time, or I can use a pre-existing lot number here. And if I do define a new one, it's also going to ask me for an expiration date if you need that. So I'll use a pre-existing one here and say continue. And now it's going to prompt me for those serial numbers. So I'll go ahead and put in some serial numbers here as if I'm scanning them. Say continue. It's going to prompt me for another one. Continue. And we're going to go through this because we've got 4 items here. So it's going to prompt me for 4 serial numbers. Once I scan all of those, it's going to ask me if I want to confirm those. And I'll say, yep, looks good. And then we're right back into that same process as before, where if we were doing receiving and put away as one step, we can show you the suggested put away here. And then we're also going to put in that license plate number. So I'm going to go ahead and put the same license plate that I scanned my last items onto as if I'm receiving them all onto one pallet or cart that I'm going to go then put away. Once again, you can print unit labels and case labels if you need them. So I'll go ahead and save my receipt here. Let's do one more just to kind of get through that one more time so you guys can see all of that. And we'll just scan another item on here. Go ahead and say how many we're receiving. We can receive all 5 of those. Continue. And then same process here, right? License plate number. Do we need to print any case labels? Do we need to change where we're receiving at? So I'll save that receipt. So there's some other situations that can happen at receiving. One of those would be collecting dimensions with our dimensioner at receiving. So if you guys, are saving dimensions for your items, maybe you're using our TMS, maybe you're using smart packing, we can actually prompt a user when an item doesn't have dimensions yet. So once they are receiving that item, we're going to say, hey, please capture dimensions using your dimensioner at this time. They're going to go ahead and grab their dimensioner. Whoops. They're going to grab their dimensioner. They're going to get those dimensions, and that's going to go ahead and write back to NetSuite to that item record. This is a great way to get dimensions as soon as the item comes into the warehouse for the first time, or if the items didn't have dimensions and they weren't in stock when you were going around and collecting a bunch of dimensions. So we'll go ahead and prompt that user and say, hey, the item is right in front of you. You're already there. Go ahead and get dimensions for that. We'll write that back to NetSuite. Another situation would be, what if you don't have that receiving document handy? So I'm going to go back to my receiving screen here and say I'm ready to receive something. I've got some items in front of me. I don't have that PO or transfer order, and I don't have something scannable to know what am I receiving off of. So we also have a search functionality here. So I'll go ahead and say search for document. And you can search based on the document number. You can search based on the vendor name or ID. So if you know this vendor just dropped off a whole shipment, you don't know what the records are that are related to that, you can search for that. You can search by item name or ID, which is really helpful if you've just got an item in front of you that you want to receive. We'll go ahead and pull up the related documents to that item. And then you can also look for, hey, I know it was supposed to arrive within a couple days from now. Let's see all the POs that were supposed to arrive recently. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and search this open. And what that's going to do is pull up every single receiving document I have in my system. So you'll see RAs here, you'll see purchase orders. And I like to do that just to show you the speed of our system. We have about 11,000 records or receiving documents in our system. And you saw that we pulled that up within a fraction of a second. So that is something that we really care about. We don't want your operators waiting around for things to load. And that is a differentiator in our space, especially when working with NetSuite. So speed is something that we're highly going to prioritize, and you'll see that throughout all the processes that we do. One other thing I want to show you guys is if you have images that you care about seeing during receiving. I'm going to go back to my search for document. I'm going to search for an item that I know has an image saved with it. If your items do have images, we can also display those during receiving, and that can just be helpful for your operators to see what they're receiving and make sure they're picking the right thing, right? So we can also show those if that's something you care about when you have images with your items. So a quick overview of everything we just talked about with receiving, right? We looked at receiving from a handheld. We looked at collecting serial numbers, lot numbers, and expiration dates during receiving. We went over license plating and why that's beneficial if you're using it. We talked about collecting those dimensions at receiving and kind of making that a one-step process. We talked about receiving and put away as one step, if that's something you want to do. You can also do them as discrete steps, which we'll kind of look at put away as a discrete step. Bulk receiving is the next thing I want to talk about because that can come up. So what happens if you need to bulk receive, right? Meaning you don't want to receive from a handheld. Maybe those items aren't even in front of you and you need to receive an entire PO. That is something that we know happens. Some people like to or have to take ownership of the PO when it hits the ocean. They don't have that in front of them yet, but they do need to go ahead and receive that into the system. So I'll bounce out of this and we're going to show you that kind of on the web page side, right? You're generally going to do this from a desktop. So we'll go ahead and we're going to go to administration and we're going to search for our PO. Let me find our PO here. We're going to scan that in and say retrieve details. So not only is this going to show you all of the items on your PO, it's also going to show you everything that's happened with your PO so far. So you can see all of the receipts that have happened with that, all the put away, and anything else that's happening with that PO. So it can also just be a good audit log of what's happening with a specific document. But the other thing you can do here is you can actually go ahead and bulk receive these. So you would put in how much are you receiving? You can change these quantities. It's going to tell you how many are remaining. You can say how many are you receiving? What's the status you're receiving them to? And where are you receiving those? So if that's a need that you have, it is something we can fully support. All right, before we move on to put away, I want to talk about one other thing, which is our inbound status summary. So I'm going to go to administration. I'm going to go to review inbound status summary and take action selected. So this is essentially showing me everything that's going on in my warehouse today. So I can see everything that's received today. You'll see those items I just received a couple minutes ago. I can see everything that's been received but not yet put away, everything that's been put away today, cross-dock demand, which we'll touch on later, and then all activity today. So I'm going to go to a date that has a little bit more activity here, just because it's morning where I am, so there's not a lot going on. All activity today can be really helpful because this is essentially your audit log of everything going on in your system. You can see receiving, picking, counting, put away, moving, whatever's going on. And you can see who did it, when it happened, where it's going. And so this can be really helpful just to get a good view of what's going on in your warehouse. And you can go ahead and copy these results and use them for whatever you want. If you want to throw that into Excel, throw that into BI or Power BI or whatever your BI tool is, play around with that data. That's something you fully have access to. All right, so that's kind of the overview of receiving. Next, we're going to talk about put away. Kelly, I think you're muted.
That was super helpful. It was a really kind of in-depth overview of how everything works. So hopefully that gave everybody a good understanding for the different features and functionality that are available. There were a couple of questions that came in, and I think Ron's answered some of them. There was a question about the dimensioner and if that's available directly. The ShipHawk dimensioner is fully integrated. It is available, to be integrated with as a handheld device. It's about the size of your mobile handheld. It can capture dimensions using senders on the device. That is similar to taking a picture. And it is capable of capturing items or a container up to around a pallet size container. There was one other question for you, Autumn. And again, just a reminder, if y'all do have questions, feel free to submit those through the Q&A box. There was one other question. Oh, in regards to errors. So if there was an error, what would with what the operator received, can you go back and make receipts? Sorry, can you make receipts go through the approval before sending it back to the ERP?
Yeah, so there's, you don't have to do that immediate write back. And then also if there was an error, you can, obviously go correct that generally in your ERP. But if that's something you're worried about, I'd say it can be good to, save the receipt at the end of, the entire PO, and then you can kind of review it, make sure it looks good to you. If that's, an approval process that you want to have in place.
Okay, awesome. So moving on to put away is our next topic here. And most people likely have a process in place for putting away inventory in their warehouse. but our functionality is a bit more advanced than just scanning an item in when they arrive, right? So can you kind of go into detail on ShipHawk's directed put away and kind of how that's applied?
Yep, absolutely. So let's take a look at put away. So as an operator, I'm probably doing that from my handheld, or maybe you're using an iPad or some other device. I'm going to go ahead into my put away. And from here, I'm going to select either an item I want to put away, or if you're utilizing license plate and carton IDs, you can go ahead and scan that license plate at this time. Or if you're someone who's using an iPad or a different device, you can also search from a dropdown or select from a dropdown of things that are ready to be put away. Because I was scanning license plate earlier, we're going to go ahead with that process. The difference here is if you were scanning just a specific item, we would just guide you through putting away that one item. With the license plate, we selected, or we actually scanned 3 different items or different SKUs to that. So we're going to walk through those 3. So we're going to go ahead and scan that and begin put away. And we're going to see all the items that are on that license plate. The reason that we display it like this versus selecting one to show the operator is because not all these items may be accessible at this time, right? One of these items might be at the very bottom of their container or their pallet. So we ask them, hey, what's accessible to you? What are you ready to put away? So let's go ahead and select one of these. And we're going to give them a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary option for put away. So this put away is all based on put away logic and rules that you're going to define during implementation. And so that can be based on the type of the item, that can be based on the velocity of the item, that can be based on, certain categories of, hey, this is a really large item, so it has to go in our large item area, right? And so what that's going to be is, in this case, say we've got a shirt that's ready to be put away. We've got a rule set for that, right? First, we want to look in our fast mover section, then in our small B area, then in our small C area, and our system is going to do that for them. So it's going to say, hey, do we have somewhere available in our first area that we want to look at? If so, let's go ahead and put that in there. A lot of times you may want to combine inventory. So if there's current inventory, we want to consolidate that. If that's something you never do and you always want things to go in an empty location, we can set that up as well. And another way to look at these put away rules is, with a more complex warehouse here, we can see a warehouse and we've got this section is the A movers, we've got the B movers, and we've got kind of the C items and overflow over here. This warehouse even has an area for their Amazon items, right? And their freight or just large items. So your warehouse can be set up in the way that works best for you guys. And then we'll go ahead and set up those put away rules based on what you guys are looking to do and what's going to work for you, right? If you have it velocity based, if it's, specific to vendor or channel, right? We can do all those things. And you can see here, hey, for a large freight item, we first want to look in this area or zone or aisle, however you're splitting those up, and then look here and then look here and go down the line like this, right? And we're going to do all of that logic for them. This is really helpful. So your operators don't have to know, hey, when I get this type of item, we like to sort over here, right? They don't have to rely on tribal knowledge of where that item is normally stored or where people like to put it. We're going to direct them through that. So as the operator, I'm going to go ahead and select an option here, right? I'm just going to choose my primary. If they needed to override this and scan a different bin, they can absolutely do that. We're not forcing them into it. We know that things come up where they may want to put it somewhere else. So they can also do that when necessary. By default, we're going to go ahead and assume they're putting the entire quantity of that item in there, but they can adjust this if they need as well. And so I'm going to select that primary and I'm going to say confirm put away. Now we're going to move on to the next item, right? I'll select my next item here. It's going to give me my 3 suggested options. We're going to choose which one I want and confirm put away, right? It really is as simple as that. They select their item, or usually they're going to be scanning this, right? So they're scanning the item on their container. When they choose, they go to the location, they scan that location to confirm that they're there and they're putting it away there and confirm, right? And now we're done. We've just put away that entire license plate that had 3 different SKUs of multiple quantities pretty quickly. All right. We'll kind of move on to cross-docking next, but you can also see our inbound overview here, right? We talked about receiving, we talked about put away and consolidating inventory where there's other current inventory and kind of those complex put away rules that you can have.
Awesome. Okay, so before we move into cross-docking, I wanted to just take a second because this is not a term that I am as familiar with. And so I'm hoping that some of the others may not be as well. So before you jump in, can you just kind of tell us what cross-docking is and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't heard of cross-docking, it's essentially moving items straight from the receiving dock to the outbound dock or a staging area, therefore skipping the typical put away process. The most common use case for that is when there's back ordered demand for an item, right? Without cross-docking, when you have back ordered demand for an item, you may have a warehouse employee receive that, go put that away in your warehouse, and then pretty much immediately go have a picker go and pick those items and bring it to the outbound area or the packing station, right? With ShipHawk WMS, you can skip that process and take out the unnecessary movement and time to put away items to just repick those items. So if back order demand exists for an item, meaning that you have open orders ready to be fulfilled with that item in them, cross-docking demand is going to be suggested by our system. So you can see what that looks like here. And this slide kind of shows you the alert that we show the user, which essentially says, hey, you've got some back order demand for 683 units of this item. Consider cross-docking, right? They can then follow that and go put those items in the cross-dock area instead of putting them away. That may be really far away in your warehouse and, taking them all the way back there for someone to just go and pick them, right? So whatever your cross-docking area looks like, if you've got a zone for that, if it's probably near your packing and shipping station, right? They can go ahead and drop that off at the cross-dock area. This is a really efficient practice. We highly recommend taking advantage of it. And it is something that, our system will look at back ordered quantity. Not all systems will. So we can help suggest that for your user. You don't have to have a warehouse manager looking at some big sheet of items and orders and back ordered. We're just going to do it automatically. So that's what we were going to cover today. We talked about receiving, we talked about directed put away, and then we talked about cross-docking, of course, with other things within that process, right? License plating, serial numbers, dimensions, capturing different things at different points in the process. I'll pass it back to Kelly, and then I know we've probably got some questions that are getting answered as well.
Awesome. That was great. I think that was a really good overview and kind of touched on not only, how it works, but why it's important and how these rules and logic cases can be applied to the warehouse. So hopefully we've got some good takeaways for everyone that they can go back and implement in their operation. So thanks for going through that in detail. Please, if you have any other questions, feel free to submit those through the Q&A box. I think we've answered most of them, but feel free to submit any more that come to mind. Before we wrap up, I do want to just touch on the rest of our life cycle of an order series. So this will show you all of the upcoming events that are currently scheduled. We'll continue to add more dates to this series. We'll continue to host these throughout the summer. These are the next few that are coming up. And I'll put the link to our landing page that has all of our dates scheduled so you can continue to check back for when those are available. I encourage you to sign up for as many of these as you can for the ones that are beneficial to you, so you can kind of get an overview of what ShipHawk offers, how it helps you automate these processes throughout the entire, life cycle of an order, from fulfillment to, your customer experience. I don't see any other questions coming in, so I think we must have answered everyone. That means we've done our job and answered all the potential questions they might have. If you do have any further questions that we didn't answer today, or if something comes up after, please feel free to email us at learnmore@shiphawk.com, and we'll make sure to get your question routed to the appropriate person that can get you an answer as quickly as possible. So with that being said, I appreciate all of you and joining us today. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Autumn, for walking us through this. And thanks for the team that was on standby to help answer questions. And I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.